Dumelang baetapele, and Dumelang and welcome to our friends and families as we celebrate our history and footprints. The 40th anniversary is a key milestone. Not only does it demonstrate the school's maturity, but it also reflects long and many years of investment in education by the school. For the thousands of students who have walked the corridors of the school, this is not only a moment for celebration, but it's also a moment for reflection. Many prominent schools in South Africa are anchored by the support that they derive from their most valuable resource, that is in their alumni. Through today's webinar and many other events that are planned around the celebration of the 40th anniversary, we should look to build a veil of support around the school. The theme has been meticulously chosen for relevance, to foster introspection, and also a call to action. The founders of the school envisaged for the school to produce baetapele ba kamoso. There are very many reasons to be proud of. For you, the current learners, your challenge is to build upon the experience that you see around you to lead the change that you want to see. Through this webinar and many other events that will be planned around the celebration of the 40th anniversary, we plan to raise funds to support the school's aging infrastructure. Our immediate challenge is to raise 5 million rands. Let us aim to this target with precision. Baetapele, let us lead and let us pledge our unwavering support. Enjoy the webinar.
Mamota, we are very proud and privileged to be part and joining hands with those who are celebrating the S.J. van der Merwe anniversary. We say halala, S.J. van der Merwe halala. We say happy 40th anniversary. And most importantly, we're saying thank you to the men and women, bomme le bontate, banna le basadi, who have built this institution to what it is today. As we join hands with the former learners, the alumni, in celebrating this 40th anniversary, it's a proud moment for us indeed. And when we were asked to be part of this, as ABSA, we did not even think twice. Education is such a close subject to us as ABSA. As things stand now, out of the 23 universities in the country, ABSA banks 17 of those. Out of the 50 TVETs colleges we have in the country, ABSA banks 40 of those institutions. And during the fees must fall, ABSA was able to give 200 million once off to make sure that the deserving students are able to complete their courses. That was followed by 150 million rands bursary scheme to make sure we walk the journey in making sure that South Africa is able to have the skills that it deserves. And today, we are part of this because this fits well with how we feel about education, and that the importance of education, especially secondary and primary education, is not lost to us. So we feel very privileged to be part of this initiative. And to that end, as we conclude, over and above all the support that we have given so far, we also want to match the funds that have been raised to the tune of 100,000. And we encourage everyone not only to be part of this webinar, but to contribute to the betterment of the school. And we encourage all corporate sponsors as well to join with us as we contribute and make sure that township schools also thrive and are able to produce the talent that South Africa can be proud of. So thank you for today, and I hope this was not a once-off, but it's also a continuing journey that ABSA could continue to partner with you in that journey. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to the 40th anniversary celebration, kicking off the 40th anniversary celebration, a whole year of celebration for S.J. van der Merwe, a school that I'm very proud to be associated with, although I'm jealous that I did not get to go to the school. We're going to be having a discussion, a panel discussion, an all-star panel that we have, and when I introduce our speakers, you'll get an idea. But at last, here is a Zoom or Teams meeting that we can all be excited about. We give thanks upfront to the sponsors of this event, ABSA and Unilever, and I will acknowledge a whole lot of people that are in attendance here. I will do that as I go along. Safe to say, today, at the onset, I need to acknowledge the organizers of this, who are the proud alumni of the S.J. van der Merwe School that is 40 years old today. They say life begins at 40, so let's see just how star-studded this lineup of panel members, of alumni will be. We've already been told that we are raising funds here, so if you are tuned in, and we appreciate your presence joining us virtually due to the circumstances of COVID-19 pandemic, we request you to be as generous as possible because the school at 40 is only getting started. We're going to be acknowledging a lot of other people, as I said. My name is Victor Khumweswana, but up front, let me acknowledge the members of the alumni, the organizers, the people who have very, very competently put this thing together. Let me acknowledge the representatives of the sponsors, ABSA and Unilever, but let me acknowledge our superstar panel member and keynote speaker today, the governor of the Reserve Bank of South Africa, Lesetja Kganyago, who himself went to another school, PAX, in Limpopo that we all wished we could be associated with. And I also have to acknowledge that I'll be introducing the panel members in the discussion today. We have Mahoshi Lesetja and we have Mpoma Kwana. It's going to be a very exciting event. I'm very confident that you're going to like what you are doing today here. But most of all, don't forget that we are here to raise funds. And don't ever forget that. And don't ever slip up in your generosity. I'm going to, if you will allow me, take you through the running order of the events today. We've already had from the welcome in the order, in no particular order, but we've heard from the representative of the alumni, Date Munale Zuma. We are going to be also acknowledging Stephen Siaka, who represented ABSA, a very, very esteemed, proud sponsor of this event. We are going to be hearing from the keynote address. They will be delivered by none other than the governor himself. But before that, we're going to be hearing from the principal of the school. We are also going to be hearing from the school choir. Let's remember that S.J. van der Merwe is a school. And a good school doesn't only concentrate on what happens in the classroom. It concentrates on what happens outside of the classroom. I dare say, as a teacher myself, Governor, that I am confident that most of the personalities, the characters that have been created by some of the greatest schools of our time and times gone by came from what happened in the extramural activities. So we're going to be hearing from the choir here. I'm making that big song and dance about the choir because I am one person who believes in extramural activities. We're also going to be hearing from some of the alumni. We have them lined up. They are all over the social media, including the names that I'll be naming. As I mentioned, you'll all remember with Salim Patel, who made headlines last year when she innovated around the COVID-19 pandemic. We have people like Gold Mamecha, we've got Mato Mavizel. I'll be introducing them as we get to the right slot in the program. But we are also going to be hearing from, as I mentioned, the two panel members, Mpoma Kwana and Mahoshi Lesetja, and we will be hearing in closing remarks the alumni representative, Mr. Phahle Phalane, who is also VP at Unilever, Southern Africa. But let's go and start this whole thing in the way that we would be. I said I'll be acknowledging some people as I go along. We have representatives here, I've just been told, of the Department of Education in Limpopo. As you know, Limpopo is the province where S.J. van der Merwe is. But pardon me, I have to check the names because they came in as I was about to start. I will have to specifically acknowledge Ms. Siriana Maisela and her brother, Mr. Rally Maisela, who is the daughter, the daughter and son, respectively, of Ndate Maisela. Who's Ndate Maisela? Ndate Maisela was the first boarding master of the school, S.J. van der Merwe. So as I acknowledge even the Department of Education in Limpopo, I think we have to welcome the Maisela family. A boarding master, if you went to a boarding school in Lesetja Kganyago, the governor, you will know a boarding master becomes your parent. your father if you are at a boys' high school, your mother if he's a matron at a girls' high school. But if he's a parent away from home, they look after everything that you do. They know everything you do. They forgive all our indiscretions as young people, and they guide us persistently. So to have the representative of Tate Maisela, or representatives of the first body master, is nothing short of a miracle. I have got to say this though, we are going to be talking about lessons that can be learned, lessons that can be learned from our politics, lessons that can be learned from our economics, how we manage the economy during this time of the pandemic. But why are we doing that? Lessons are important. You learn from failure, you learn from success. It's a lot easier, funny enough, to learn from failure, but it is even more important to learn from the successes of what you do. Our country, our continent, our world battled with a pandemic, or battled the pandemic, and we learned so many things that we did well, so many things that we did not do so well. But in that process, we have learned so much that to the alumni, the young people who are joining us on this webinar, and those are the most important guests, by the way, and they are all over the web, as you know, they are very comfortable with the virtual economy. Those are the people who are going to take these lessons and take them into the future. They are the leaders of the future. The motto of the school was about Baetapele Bakamuso. So these young people today who are joining us here are the leaders of tomorrow. We are looking to them to take as much as possible from the keynote, to take as much as possible from the remarks that are going to be ably made by Mpomakwana and Mahoji Lesetja, and we're going to be expecting them through their questions, through their contributions, to take these lessons and enrich their education so that when they finally step up and become the governors of our reserve banks, the presidents of our countries, the VPs of our companies, the executive directors like Stephen Siaka that we know, the community leaders, school principals, and so on, they are very well trained, not only from the book knowledge that they learned, but also from the lessons that they would have taken from how their leaders were running the country. But hey, we are here to talk about SJ van der Merwe, the school. But how much do we know about it? So to tell us about the school, let's please listen to the head mistress or the principal of the school, Miss Nkasana Mataka.
SJ van der Merwe was established in 1981 as a technical high school. It was actually one of the few technical high schools in the country. And currently, as we are speaking, we are a full service school, and a full service technical high school means that we do offer support to different types of learners who are experiencing different types of barriers. We do have physically challenged learners. We do have learners that have got barriers academically in the class, and all sorts of barriers that a person can think of. We do admit the child and support the learner accordingly. We are also an MST beneficiary. MST means Men's Science and Technology, beneficiary of the Department of Basic Education, where we receive support from the Department of Basic Education in terms of resourcing the Math, Science and Technology subjects. And the values that we are inculcating in our learners is for them to be innovative and creative, and also be inclusive in their day-to-day lives, whether in the school or outside the school. And by doing so, we believe that our learners will then become properly prepared to become global leaders, because the motto of our school is saying, and therefore, whatever we are doing, we try to make sure that we support our learners to become leaders tomorrow. And of course, we continue to pride ourselves to say, as an institution, we have been producing quality results in matric over the years, and majority of our learners are able to reach to university level and other institutions like your University of Technologies and our TVET colleges in the field that are mostly challenged at the moment. That is your technical field or your engineering field, your science field, as well as your commercial field. And we want to put it out there that we, as an institution, we feel that where we are, we did not reach the level where we want our school to be. And should there be anybody who want to come in and invest in the institution, as we are celebrating 40th of existence of our institution, you are welcome to do so. And we promise that we will live up to our motto, which is saying about Baetapele ba Kamoso, and also live up to the vision of the institution, which is to be a center of inclusive educational excellence in maths, technology, and commerce, I think.
Thank you very much to the principal of SJ van der Merwe. It's always heartening to me when I see a woman running a school, because I know that we have, Governor, I'm sure you will agree with me, that research proves all over the world that women make better managers, they make better directors of companies. I'm not talking about waffle stuff that I pick up from all. You look up the research online, you'll find that women-run companies outperform their male-run counterparts, whether they are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, on the JSE. Whenever you give a woman a chance to do something, they do deliver excellent results. So I'm pleased to see that SJ van der Merwe, the school that all of us people who were born in Limpopo, especially around Leboa home, were jealous that we were not given a chance to go to. You know, we would say nasty things about the people, and these snobs, they think they are something. Because they were founded in 1981. Imagine we went to old schools, and here comes a new school, and it has got the bright uniform, very colorful uniform. They are boarding school, very close to where we all live, but we can't get in. So we looked at them with envy, but we also wish that we could be there. And when we couldn't, we started, you know, it's okay. We had the sour grapes attitude. We appreciate you, Ms. Nkasana Makapu, as the school principal, and we are hopeful that under your leadership, we will be able to get some fundraising going here. I told you before when I started, that a good school does not concentrate only on what is happening in the classrooms. It concentrates on what's happening outside. And to give us a taste of what the school is like, let's listen to the SJ van der Merwe School Choir. Thank you very much, my children, and I must thank the conductor as well. You know, when you hear talent like that, you know there's a teacher, an adult, who's able to, one, identify the talent, number two, channel it into the choir, because not every young person thinks it's cool to sing in a choir, then train that choir, polish it, and that talent comes out in the kind of music that we have here. And I'm sure, Governor, you have on your playlist Aretha Franklin or somebody like that. All these singers that we know, most of them started either singing in a school choir or in a church choir or both. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to listen to our keynote speaker here. He really needs no introduction, but hey, some of you are too young to know who he is. After all, he went to a school like S.J. van der Merwe, that's a legendary institution. He was born in Alexander Township, here in the northeast of Johannesburg, but his parents found a way of concocting a scheme to ensure that he's born in this township so that he would qualify to work. Remember, the past laws didn't allow you to work in the urban areas like what were called white areas like Johannesburg. If you were not born there, you would need a pass that would have to endorse that you are either allowed to look for a job, or you are looking for a job, or you are employed. Otherwise, you had to go back. But he went to Moleji, back to Moleji, Amariban, where he was five, and he was raised by his grandmother for the first 3 years of primary school at Mahoshi until his mother assumed full responsibility. He attended junior secondary school at Karabi High and completed his high school at another legendary institution, Pax College. Lesetja took leadership roles at an early age as he took to the battles of the community over access to drinking water and farming land. But such was life in the 1980s. You were not born into politics. You didn't need to be trained by anything. Whatever you lived with around you prepared you for leadership. You either were going to just be washed out by the system, or you were going to find a way to adjust. And people like Lesetja Kganyago, who is our speaker today, did that, and he assumed that leadership role from a young age. An economist and a central banker, he was appointed to this post of the governor of the South African Reserve Bank in 2014. He holds a Master's of Science degree in economics from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Ladies and gentlemen, let me step aside as you welcome none other than the Reserve Bank Governor in South Africa, Lesetja Kganyago.
Thanks very much, Victor. I hope those kids, you know, when the school was established, I too thought that I could have been there. But when I agreed to come and speak here, it was in honor of my uncle Ntopile Kganyago, who was involved in the creation of the school. During those days, he was a school inspector. So I felt duty bound to come and speak to you today. And I think that maybe just to kick off, we have got to recall where we are today as a global community and where we are as South Africans. That the COVID-19 pandemic and the great lockdown that followed had a massive health and economic ramifications globally. Global supply chains were disrupted, aggregate demand was depressed, and the effects of these disruptions still linger. The pandemic and its immediate aftermath was indeed an extreme stress event, yet financial markets were largely resilient, and this demonstrated the effectiveness of many improvements to financial market resilience made over the past decade. The crisis also highlighted areas that required attention. I think what it becomes clear is that as we talk about the economic costs of this pandemic, we need to be cognizant of the fact that this pandemic is actually measured in the costs that it inflicted on fellow human beings. And that as we go through this and we look back and say that this is the worst world pandemic since the so-called Spanish flu outbreak in 1918. But as we talk about the cost of on human lives of this pandemic, these figures of people who have contracted the virus, people who have died from the side effects or symptoms of the virus, they have stopped just representing the number of people who have died. Today, everyone that I know has been touched by this pandemic in one way or the other. So every number that comes out represents an uncle, it represents an aunt, a father, a mother, a grandmother, a grandfather, it represents another sibling. So the cost is really in human lives. But today I am speaking to you as the governor of the Reserve Bank, and necessarily I would narrow myself to the economics, and I would like to just pick up on two things. One is the impact of the virus on the economies and how, as central banks, we have responded to that. Secondly, I would like to touch just a bit about the issues of technology, and I'm doing this deliberately because I'm speaking at SJ van der Merwe. I will touch on it so that I can provoke your engagement on the issues of technology. And then lastly, I would like to draw on what lessons have we learned from this. And those lessons might be some policy lessons, they might also be some leadership lessons, but it is important that as young people you appreciate what is it that was taking place and what we think that we had learned from this. So in response to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, governments across the world implemented containment measures to help slow the spread of the virus, protect lives, and allow care systems to cope. Fiscal and monetary institutions such as the South African Reserve Bank, responded with financial assistance of unprecedented speed and scale to limit the extent of the economic contraction and to help set the stage for a sustainable global recovery. Global fiscal support is estimated to have reached nearly $16 trillion in 2020. Average overall deficits as a share of GDP in 2020 reached 11.7% for advanced economies, which was higher than what we saw during the global financial crisis and the highest since World War II. In collaboration with their fiscal counterparts, central banks were again at the forefront of policy responses. More specifically, the COVID-19 pandemic put to the test once again the role of central banks in managing a crisis. Emergency action by the world's monetary authorities helped stave off a financial crisis. Most major global central banks swiftly and sharply cut rates to zero to shore up their economies, and with no further room to stimulate their economies, resorted to unconventional monetary policies. Developing economy central banks also engaged in substantial asset purchases during the COVID-19 pandemic, but for different reasons. The goal was to address dysfunction in financial markets rather than to affect yields or stimulate the economy. Generally, the policy responses were broad-based as they were calibrated in the nature of the shock as well as country-specific financial system failures. These actions helped to preserve the effectiveness of monetary transmission mechanisms, maintaining financial stability and supporting the flow of credit to the real economy. But what had been the situation at home? How has the South African economy experienced this crisis, and how did the authorities and those in leadership respond to this? South Africa entered the COVID crisis on the back of a technical recession, combined with mounting fiscal stress, growing public sector debt, and a downgrade to sub-investment grade. Well, put in the language of the pandemic, South Africa entered this pandemic with an economy that suffered from its own comorbidities. So, going into the crisis though, the South African banking system had significantly higher levels of capital and liquidity, a consequence of the implementation of the global standards after the global financial crisis. Banks were therefore in a stronger position to absorb shocks and mitigate disruptions to banking services. Given this backdrop, we, like the rest of the world, used a wide range of measures at our disposal to respond to the crisis. These measures included, from the government side, a quick launch of a stimulus package amounting to approximately $26 billion to address the economic impact of the pandemic. The package was allocated to additional health support, wage protection through the Unemployment Insurance Fund, expanded social grants, tax deferrals, financial support for small and informal businesses, and the largest component, the loan guarantee scheme that required the private banking system to extend loans to firms in distress. The SARB assisted the National Treasury in setting up and administering this loan guarantee scheme. What did the central bank itself do, though, directly? Earlier gains in stabilizing South Africa's inflation well within the target range created monetary policy space and allowed the SARB to massively cut rates in response to the pandemic. The Monetary Policy Committee lowered the repurchase rate by a cumulative 275 basis points between March and July, one of the largest moves by any emerging market country. The COVID-19 pandemic induced negative sentiment towards risky assets, prompting a sell-off of financial assets globally and constrained liquidity in parts of the financial system. In South Africa, this was exacerbated by the downgrade of our sovereign credit rating to sub-investment grade. Domestic and foreign exchange forward markets also showed signs of strain and experienced liquidity shortages. In response to the market stress and to facilitate the flow of credit to cash constrained businesses and individuals, the SARB injected liquidity into money markets through large and more frequent repo operations. In response to signs of illiquidity, the government bond in the government bond market, the SARB embarked on a program of asset purchases. These asset purchases were designed to address dysfunction in markets, not to stimulate the economy. Why would the SARB do this? The manner in which monetary policy is implemented and executed in South Africa works through a collateral system. Put simply, if a financial institution is to access central bank money from the SARB, in other words, that financial institution needs to pledge collateral. That collateral has to have a price. But if the markets are dysfunctioning, no one knows what the value of that collateral is. It is for that reason that the SARB decided to enter the bond market to make sure that there is proper price discovery in the bond market, and such that collateral could have a price to be attached to, and that our monetary policy operation continues to work. The repo rate during this period had remained significantly above the zero lower bound, indicating availability of policy space. Besides the measures with respect to financial markets, we also took steps on the regulatory side. The prudential regulator of the banking sector provided regulatory relief measures in 3 areas, namely capital relief on restructured loans that were in good standing before COVID-19 crisis, secondly, a lower liquidity coverage ratio, and thirdly, a lower capital requirement. This was done in an effort to support the flow of credit and the broader economic recovery from the crisis, while maintaining the soundness and functioning of the banking sector. The slowdown in economic activity brought on by lockdown measures implemented to cap the spread of the virus was expected to reduce bank profitability and in turn put significant pressure on the supply of capital. The onset of the COVID-19 crisis was accompanied by immense uncertainty and financial market turmoil in both money and bond markets. There was a sharp increase in the demand for short-term liquid assets, the so-called flight to quality. So foreigners sell South African assets and run for the safety of the advanced market. The decline in the value of government securities, which account for the majority of high-quality liquid assets held by the banks, combined with the shorter maturity profile of bank funding, placed banks under pressure to meet the liquidity requirements. And as such, the regulatory measure that was given was to release them so that they could drop below the regulatory requirements. But what has worked and what didn't work? Well, the SARB's response to an unprecedented crisis and contraction in economic activity has been strong and quick and helped to prevent economic contraction from feeding into a credit crunch and financial market meltdown. Low interest rates have provided much relief to households and firms by reducing debt service costs while at the same time stimulating demand. We have since seen a strong rebound in durable goods demand as well as strong housing market activity. The most widely used regulatory relief measure, which was provided by the banking sector, is the adjusted treatment of restructured loans. The value of restructured loans peaked at just over 600 billion in July 2020. The uptake of the restructured loan has since slowed, with new restructures since December 2020 constituting on average less than 2% of the total restructures. This is on the back of better than expected economic activity. Interestingly, the capital and the liquidity coverage ratios were not utilized by the banks during this crisis. And as I said, the preference was to use the restructuring of the outstanding loans to provide relief. And maybe before I conclude, let me deal with briefly with the issue of technology. That what we have had, including this platform, now I would have had to probably go and find my way and be in the Wokomo somewhere to come and speak there. And what technology has offered is that we are all able to come together in this. But what has been the impact of technology on the world of central banking? Primarily, it had been what had been called fintech, or rather I should be calling it techfin, because it is really the application of technology in the financial space. I don't know how many of you have been inside a bank recently, but your bank branch is now this one, and most of us do transactions on this one, and that has had a big impact on the financial sector. And so when sometimes I hear people scream about how this or that branch, and I ask, when did you last go to your own bank branch and you find that people have not even been inside a bank for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, some even more. And such is the impact of technology on the financial services sector. But what has been current among central banks is what has been called central bank digital currencies. Could it happen that one day we will no longer carry banknotes and coin, and that the currency that we would have will be some digital code lying somewhere. Like most central banks, the South African Reserve Bank had been studying this, and we went out to market with a proof of concept this year to digitize, to explore the possible digitization of the South African rand. May I say that in the main, the rand is already predominantly digital. The wholesale market is predominantly digital. What we have not had is the application of this technology in the retail space, so that is what you actually end up to keep. And these things come, central banks are looking at this, and there are these other characters who call themselves cryptocurrencies. The point about it, I say they call themselves cryptocurrencies, is that they are actually not quite currencies. They are actually assets, yes. Because for them to be currencies, they must meet 3 criteria. They have got to be a unit of account, they have got to be a medium of exchange, and they have got to be a store of value. If they don't, they are not a currency. So in concluding this address, let me say what I think had been the lessons that had been learned. Firstly, you must make hay while the sun shines. It is important to build buffers to strengthen resilience of banking systems during normal times, and that this serves as an anti-crisis crisis tool. Amongst other policies, implementing global regulatory reforms and has served the purpose for South Africa. However, going forward, we need to think more about how we build buffers in the banking system, not only to reflect the build-up of financial imbalances over time, but to also respond quickly to external shocks. This thing of making hay while the sun shines, since you are at Van der Merwe, is tantamount to you must build a dam when you have the good rain so that you could store this water such that when drought comes, you have got a dam from which you could actually draw. Building the dam during drought is not going to help you. The second lesson is that of policy coordination. That both on a global and domestic perspective, it was important that policies are coordinated to reduce excessive speculation, which could undermine policy effectiveness, particularly for emerging markets such as South Africa. Equally, fiscal, monetary, and financial policy coordination are essential at a national level. And today, you could look back and say that policymakers in South Africa had coordinated their response to this crisis with excellence. Last and not least is that time is of an essence in a crisis. You must act with speed if necessary and fine-tune policy as you go along. When the crisis hits, you go back and you look at your crisis manual, and trust me, the crisis does not evolve according to your crisis manual. It becomes a different challenge altogether. So, in my view, the anti-crisis policies which were implemented were more successful than initially anticipated. This, however, may need to be recalibrated in the wake of another crisis, given that no two crises are exactly the same. As soon as conditions allow, the priority will have to be to rebuild policy buffers for monetary, prudential, and fiscal policies. South Africa is a country that had faced adversity before, and we had conquered that adversity. This crisis too, we shall capture as long as we have leadership with resolve to do so. Back to you, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor. And by the way, everybody, this is still me. And the reason I'm no longer wearing a suit, I'm trying my hand at being a model. So I hope you can read. I hope you can read on, the governor said, make hay while the sun shines, which which in modern terms means take advantage, take full advantage of what you have. So while we have you all online, let me show you, we are trying to raise funds here, let's not forget that. And we are not raising funds so that we can have a big party. We are raising funds so that we can help the school build and develop or restore its infrastructure. A 40-year-old school needs some revival and refurbishment. That's why the infrastructure committee here decided to have this webinar. And that's why we appreciate the likes of Unilever and ABSA. And ABSA, if you heard Stephen Siaka earlier on saying that they will match whatever amount is going to be raised. Now, if you don't chip in with any money, ABSA will have a very low amount to match. And we don't want them matching peanuts. We want them matching real money so that the school hall, all the facilities that the school will be using this money to upgrade will be taken all the way. So this cap here, I hope the young people here like my swag because they can be very difficult as judges, governor of fashion and style. These are t-shirts that we've made, but they will be mainly golf t-shirts. And golf shirts are much better and they're a good fashion statement, but this will be in the color scheme. There will be a blue one, there will be a yellow one, depending on what color is your favorite. I just got this because it was the only size that was available. And the caps, as you can see, they are all about 40th anniversary. 1981, very special year to me. Governor, thank you very much. I will reflect on some of the points you made here. But if I may just ask, I heard you talk about liquidity. You know, when you talk about liquidity, many people don't quite understand the bond markets and the relationship to liquidity. How would you simplify it to the people listening here? Because it's a very crucial point to be addressed. Governor?
Thanks, Homeson. Liquidity in the bond market simply reflects to the ability of buyers and sellers to sell and buy bonds. So when we say there is liquidity, it means sellers can find buyers and buyers can find the bonds that they are looking for, and that those bonds get settled such that those who sold get their money. But there is another form of liquidity in the banking sector, which reflects how well the bank is able to meet the demands that you have. So you deposit money in the bank lends it to Makwana. Makwana is funding a business, and the business is waiting to sell things, and once they have sold things, they pay Makwana. Makwana has to then repay the bank. But what happens when Khomeswana, who has deposited his money, goes to the bank and asks for his money before Makwana has repaid and the bank has lent the money to Makwana? If the bank can't meet that, we say the bank has got a liquidity problem. And so as regulators, what we do to make sure to protect you as a depositor, so that one day when you go to the bank and you are looking for your money, you can get it. We put a requirement on the banks to maintain a certain level of liquidity based on history, such that when you come to request your money, the bank is able to meet its obligations. So liquidity, you have liquidity in those sense. That liquidity in the bond market, you can also apply it to the share market or any other market where financial assets are traded.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Governor. We're going to have questions from young people after this, but we are going to just move on. By the way, everyone listening in, especially my children from SJ van der Merwe, when the governor talks of the bond, he's not talking about the bond to buy a house. He's talking about the instruments that the government uses to borrow money from the public. So let's just differentiate that. But I don't want to start putting on my teaching cap here, because then I can bore you to tears. Let's move on to the next item here, because we are going to be asking questions, and the the panel member, the first panel member is an alumna. We have lots of alumni here on the call. We have lots of them, and I think we can just flash some of the pictures if I may be given that opportunity by. So some of the alumni that we have here include the following people that are flashing on the screen, and I want to just run through them very quickly. One of them is Gold Mamecha, who's an industrial designer selected to design South Africa's new national orders through a design pitching proposals among many entries to the presidency. And the work of Gold Mamecha include the Order of Mapunguwe and the Order of the Supreme Councillor of the Baobab and the Order of the Companions of OR Tambo. So when you talk about new symbols of the government of the Republic of South Africa in the democratic dispensation, you're talking about people like Gold Mamecha, who went to SJ van der Merwe, Matlo Mabitsela, founder of Bomumo Farms in the Capricorn district. She runs her own piggery, trains upcoming pig farmers with a special focus on empowering women around Polokwane about pig farming, with her main focus being agro-processing, which means adding value to that which she produces, as well as ensuring that women are involved along the entire value chain of the sector. We also have, let me see, Nkeko Caroline Mampuru, who's the head of the Special Investigations Unit within Absa Bank, our lead sponsor for this webinar, I might add. Her public sector experience spanning many years working in senior positions at the Auditor General Office, the Special Investigations Unit, and the Asset Forfeiture Unit of the National Prosecuting Authority. We're talking big hitters here. I told you this is an all-star meeting. Maureen Manyama, who is a qualified chartered accountant, or CA as we say, also holder of an MBA. She served on several boards, both in the public and private sector. Key highlights including the South African Reserve Bank, where the governor or keynote speaker is at the moment, Aspen, the pharmaceutical company, Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth, and she currently serves on the board of Pareto Limited, a property company, Bank Limited. She's passionate, Maureen, that is about improving government accountability and promoting transparency. Boy. Acclaimed South African producer. Many soap operas and telenovelas that you watch on TV are produced by Patu Makwarela. He's a content creator popular for many fascinating local soapies in Mzansi, co-founder of the award-winning production company Heads Up Productions of Pictures. He has created a number of South Africa's most watched telenovelas, including the very popular The River and Legacy, among others. Wetale Mpahlele is not an alumna yet, but she is on her way. She's in grade 12, and as you know, she has developed a prototype last year which won an award for a device that she hopes will help curb gender-based violence and human trafficking in South Africa. The app was called the Alerting Earpiece, which is a device that can be worn like an ordinary earring, capturing photos of perpetrators. So it's like a body camera, but worn as an earring, and sends an alert to devices that have been paired with it. And Mpahlele's invention, who comes from Tambahani, I think, which is along the Jane First, the Wahomu route, is her invention comes amidst of gender-based violence related offenses and femicide with incidents of human trafficking making the news for SORI. We have also Alec Muemi, who is the Director General of the Department of Transport in South Africa. He previously served as the Director General of the Department of Sports and Recreation as well. He has served organizations such as the Congress of South African Students, that's what the governor of the Reserve Bank will know, and many alumni of SJ van der Merwe, South African Students Press Union, and the South African Students Congress, which is SASCO, which was the university version of COSAS. Malijile Mpahlele, General Manager for Transport, and also the MTN Group, as you know, MTN, the leading mobile telephone network operator in Africa and Middle East, the leading automation of the network in the space. He has contributed and presented intensively and extensively on the topic, recently publicizing the deployment of the DCSG product in MTN Uganda as testament to this effort, which will lead the services that are going to be offered to customers seamlessly. formerly executive head of transmission at Vodacom. He leads the company in the deployment of fiber, which is where the future is headed in this IT era, to most of its sites ahead of competition. Lastly, but not least, Emily Mahumantite, who is also Ramabele, that's her African name, an executive coach and mentor with more than 27 years of corporate life experience. She is an advisory board member in the Tshwane University of Technology, the National Economic Educational Trust, and the Dr. Mutsuenyane Rural Development Foundation. These are all stars people. So when you look at the young people at SJ van der Merwe, do not just think of them as people. You must consider you could be, if you are not helping them, if you are not contributing to the fundraising initiative that we are trying to promote with merchandise, corporate merchandise like these t-shirts and caps that you can buy among other things, or in addition to making your contribution, you are going to be letting down South Africa. You can hear, nobody would have had an idea when they went to SJ van der Merwe that these alumni would be where they are today. And there's no denying what contribution they've made to the development of our society. So let's move on to the next speaker, who's be adding, complementing, supplementing. Okay, sorry about I think we lost the connection. The next speaker was born in Atteridgeville and raised in Jane First. He attended SJ van der Merwe Technical High School and matriculated at Promet. He's a graduate of the Universities of Zululand, the University of Pretoria, and the Kellogg Graduate School. He's an independent director who serves on various listed companies, including but not limited to ArcelorMittal South Africa Limited, where he's independent non-executive director, and Nedbank Group, where he's lead independent director. He's also chairman of the Economic Development Agency. He considers himself a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks. I have knocked on many doors after graduating, and by the grace of God Almighty, doors of opportunities were open for me. Every time these doors were open, there was a catalyst, a mentor, and a coach. Most of these were from, the GI, the silent and baby boomer generations, but a handful of his peer generation X, whatever, also open or true for him. Perhaps it is his turn, he says, to come and step onto the plate and open doors for others and let them find their voice. These are the words of the next speaker, and he's none other than Mpho Makwala.
Raleboga mswara marapo sebata seshu Victor Khomeswana. My brother, it is a serious crime that you are there wearing the SJ VDM flag before I did. We must fine you for that as part of our fundraising. Kiatamish. Mhlomperi, the 10th governor of the South African Reserve Bank, who is also my regulatory authority in my capacity as acting chairman at Nedbank. Ora Lesetja Kganyago Towe. Yorangwane, who's also my late uncle, Malume Ntopile Kganyago, was a shadow uncle mentor to me while I was at SJ. On my maternal grandmother's side, ke setlogolo sa Bahlalero kua Mariwana, kua Mletje. A fellow panelist and sister, Me Makgoshi Lekgete, Sapete Kgaitsedi Masogana, setlogolo sa batau ba Phetla Bakoni, o Malabola a Mashego, Towe. Hlogo ya sekolo, number 6, if memory serves me well. You are number 6 since 1981, because if I'm not mistaken, me Nkasana Sophie Matlapu. Morena Munalera Zuma, our relentless champion and ambassador of our Alumni Trust, and also ambassador of SJ van der Merwe. Vaitapele Kamoka, who are here online, peers from 1981, the first cohort of 20-something students, learners, who matriculated in 1985. We followed them in 1982 as the cohort of the matric class of 1986. Although, as I shall comment later, I couldn't matriculate at SJ in 1986. Lelena baetapele wa lekgono ba le itušetšang go ba baetapele ba kamoso matric class of 2021. Ka moka baetapele ke a le dumediša. My reflections on leadership and power as the first piece of this theme, I believe would best be exercised by looking back to 16 July 1986. On a fateful morning as we broke class for tea to find ourselves surrounded by soldiers and hippos from the old SADF, which we called SADF at the time. I was a matriculate on a journey to become an electronic engineer. That career path changed in deference to where destiny took me since that day. The journey on that day from SJ van der Merwe to Malepisi police station as a detainee under the state of emergency regulations, later to be transferred to Pietersburg prison or Polokwane prison today, changed my life forever. My fellow prisoners from SJ to Malepisi were, among others, Raida Mokhotadi, who I think I'd be remiss if I didn't salute today, because together he and Lazarus Pogu, Raida, who was my roommate in room A18, recruited me into courses, and my journey with the struggle would not have taken off if the two of them had not recruited me. Also on the way to Malepisi, if memory serves me well, was my long-standing friend, Peva Malupi, Dr. Alexis Mashfan. And from Malep's drift to Polokwane, we then reconnected, among others, with Sakile Kheta. And if memory serves me well, also Hilary Pasha. And then, of course, we couldn't interact with them regularly because they were in the female section of the prison, the late Daisy Matlo, Malif Maupa and others, but we always had ways of sending messages across the different sections of prison. I think also it would be remiss if we do not acknowledge that there are those who paid a greater price, the ultimate sacrifice that I believe Lesetja Kganyago made on behalf of all of us who were sentenced to serve a good number of years in prison for our strike action in 1985 should not go uncelebrated, unnoticed, and not recognized. I was also privileged to reconnect with him in 2005-06 when I was provincial director for Standard Bank in Limpopo, and got to learn of his career and how he then, out of prison, grew to become a distinguished teacher in the Seshego area. The school's motto of Baetapele Bakamoso is prophetic. It was initially drummed into us by the first headmaster, Mr. D.C. Benade, our beloved Afrikaans teacher, who we continue to have as a friend and former teacher in our WhatsApp group, and that is Lesetja Kganyago, aka the Black Cat of Anguten. Later, we progressed through the stewardship of Principal von Gericke, and ultimately, when the 1986 state of emergency milestone hit us, we were led by the first black headmaster, Ntate Makgopa. I would also be remiss if I did not acknowledge that our first boarding master, Rakgolo Elson Maisela, we called him Lekhwati because he was quite a disciplinarian. But from his discipline that he instilled in us, that in my humble view shaped my success and many other of Baetapele who lived in the boys' hostel. I believe that there are 6 lessons I can reflect on, which also coalesce with the theme of conversation today. Firstly, he instilled a very deep sense of personal discipline in us. Every morning at 5 a.m., we greeted the sunshine and had to be ready, standing by our beds, already made. Most importantly, the made-up bed had to be shaped like an envelope on the sides, such that if you were to put a spirit level or water pass, it needed to be 100% level. And if that didn't happen, then every morning, number 2, every morning we had prayer with breakfast in the dining hall. And my personal appreciation of hymns, especially English hymns, was strengthened by Rakhulu myself. I already came from a strict and deeply Christian upbringing, but Rakhulu Maisela entrenched this in us. Lesson number 3, every evening we had prayer in the foyer in front of the head boarding master's rooms. And so there we would receive scripture, sing hymns, and reflect on, and I must say he was a good singer. If he just started chanting Blessed Assurance, or if he started chanting Holy, 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 we all knew how to follow tune. Number 4, part of the self-discipline that he taught us is that we cleaned our own rooms. Yes, there were cleaners, but half the time we had to do our own cleaning. Number 5, we washed and ironed our own laundry. Those very tough khaki uniforms, we had to wash and iron them and ensure that they were spick and span and that they passed his test of perfection. Every Saturday morning, we did gardening barefooted, no PPE whatsoever. This later got interchanged with as and when there were sports days, but if there was no sport, we knew that spades, forks, rakes and all, we would be up doing our fair share of maintaining the school lawns and garden. So if I look back to this grounding relative to the theme at hand and some of the inputs we had from the governor, what I believe he taught us was number 1, and that is now relevant in work life and career building, is that number 1, you have to master yourself before you can aspire or purport to lead others. A lot of failed exercises of leadership are because the leaders themselves don't have a good sense of self-discipline that can be modeled. Because you see, a leader is someone you choose to follow to a place that you wouldn't go by yourself. And therefore that leader must be an epitome, must be a model of self-mastery. Secondly, I believe that there's a profound solace to be found in a positive relationship with God's scriptures and the beautiful melody of hymns, as Ntate Rakhulu Maisela taught us. This continues to sustain me even today when one is going through difficult, stressful times. I still find solace in hymns. 3, he put God first in everything he did as a devout. He was a devout Presbyterian. And I remember quite remarkably when I had to confront news of death in my family in my teens on one of those important occasions. It was his difficult task to tell me that my maternal grandfather, his childhood and schoolmate that went to school with him in Ramphahlele, Muruti E.M. Patudi, had passed in 1983. And what was profound is that how he conveyed the news to me was just really something that has stuck with me until today. We got into his office by the dining hall kitchen. He was the most gentle and said to me, "My son, let's kneel down and pray." After the short prayer, he sat me down in his office and said, "Monna, Rakhulu Mogale urishile. Please go and pack what you need. I will drop you off in Lesetja at your grandfather's house on my way home." Now there's limited time, so with the limited time I have, let me then move to the national and international sphere as per the Governor number 10's keynote address. He and another governor call each other by numbers. And because I'm close to both of them, I hope I can take liberty number 10. We are global citizens first, in terms of what I heard. We are global citizens first and foremost. So we need to know, that as a technical or a commercial learner, and ultimately as a graduate professional, you need to make it your business to be an informed, conscientious, local, national, South African, and global citizen. Time permitting, I would share with you how, as students in SJ, we got involved with the Modumo district, where I was also involved through COSAS, which got renamed SASCO after the bannings of COSAS in the 80s. We did not just shoot to the national and global scene. We started ground up and got involved with local challenges. We can narrate to you stories of being in an LTE bus going to Appel to attend the funeral in 1985 of the late Mampoane Chabileng's funeral. And some of the narratives we can give you about the encounters we had with the SANDF and the Leboa police at that time. So be informed, conscientious, local, national, South African, and global citizens. Number 2, understand your skill sets in the context of being a sustainable contributor to the macroeconomic environment that Governor number 10 was speaking about. And in that second lesson, I would hope that I'm living proof that you can become whatever and whoever you choose to be, or you focus your mind to be. Because in my instance, for instance, in 1987, I wrote, after coming out of prison in December 86, I wrote my matric at Promet College because I couldn't be allowed back into a public school at that time. And did both grade 11 and grade 12 commercial subjects for the first time in 1 year. And by grace of God, passed with distinction, which at that time we called matric exemption, or today university entrance, and pursued a career in commerce and administration. It's a long story in terms of how in prison, through Mohabul and others, I was persuaded to fall in love with all matters economic and all matters commercial, by the persuasive and inspirational Thabo Makunyane, who we called him the rabbi in prison, just because of his sheer political knowledge at the time. Linked to the need to know that you can be whoever and whatever you become, one of the most profound life statements an uncle said to me in 1987, as I stepped out of the home in Atteridgeville, heading to the train station to Kempton Park in Promet. One of my malumes, Napinyana Mbagale Ahlabirwa Moloto, said to me on that first day, and I quote, "Mpho, there are 2 types of men in society. One is a man because he's wearing pants like all others. The second is a man because he's a contributor and a shaper of society." And with those heavy words on my shoulders, he said, good luck, as I left for Promet College. Lesson number 3 from what I can reflect on relative to what the governor has said is that one of the skills I believe we should teach early at schools, especially such as SJ van der Merwe, Sesinkasana, is networking. If I look at the profound manner in which the schools my children went to invest in networking, most of those networking skills, luckily for me, I learned in Polokwane prison from Mohabul. As I said, from the likes of Thabo Makunyane, Prince Mafojane, and many others. But I believe these networking skills shaped my skills in navigating my professional and career path to date. So Baitapele, for instance, to give you quick examples, join LinkedIn, and don't just join to be a passive contributor or passive observer or passive consumer. Be an active contributor with a profile that people want to engage with, even as a student. Use social media strategically, using social media just to to share TikTok things where you're making jokes of others or jokes of yourself. These things will come to haunt you later when you have to look back on your personal brand. So use social media strategically. Read a lot outside of your skill sets. Don't say because now I'm doing fitting and turning and therefore maybe one day I'll be a mechanical engineer. That's all I'm going to read. Read beyond that area. Don't equally say, no, I'm just in commerce and not read about the life that a fit and turner or electronic engineer goes through. Fourthly, the fourth industrial economy is sense shifting your career continuously. Every skill set you had in a technical sense that you had last week is no longer relevant today. So you've got to constantly be committed to lifelong learning, or in the professions, they talk about continuous professional development. Also, what we learned from the first boarding master, Raholo Maisele, is that leadership is impossible without self-mastery, as I've already demonstrated. But most importantly, seek first to be a contributor rather than a consumer in society. That way you'll have a healthy and productive relationship with power, with the economy, and crafting the future. Number 5, reflecting from lessons from what the governor has shared, on that quest of self-mastery and success, it's important that you shine and let shine. So don't be happy when you are in an environment and you can say, no, now I'm the only such and such. In the new dispensation as South Africa was being shaped, we used to find people being happy to be called, no, I'm just the only black person in this field, or I'm just the only woman in this field. That doesn't serve anybody. Work hard to ensure that you build a critical mass around yourself so that you have a legacy to talk of, and again, a network to talk of. Finally, from successes of leaders like Lesetja Kganyago, Governor number 10, and others, we learn that leadership is impossible without moral authority, and especially now in the times we're in of fake news, in times we're in of confused values, in the times we're in where actually, in some instances, technology is actually eroding humanity. I'm sure you all are familiar with the idea of people sitting in the same lounge or each being glued to their mobile phones. We've lost conversational skills, we've lost connectivity skills, but most importantly, we've just lost classical skills of how to grow and be a holistic human being. I'm glad the people like Emily Maroma were cited as executive coaches. You need to find a coach, a role model, a mentor that you can engage with from time to time, so that when you deal with some of the challenges that the governor talks about, digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, you are able to sift what is right for you and what is not right for you. I share his passion for, he likes saying cryptocurrencies are not a real currency, but I like to say cryptocurrencies are currencies without moral authority. And most members of my family know that the moment they come to tell me about this and the other, the first thing I tell them is, please stay away from those, because one day you're going to end up in tears. And the challenge here is that from a moral authority point of view, it is not always visible who's behind cryptocurrencies. There's always a mob family behind that has got heavily invested interests in, because it is prone to moving money that is not ethical and cleaning it up and bringing it into the formal economy. It is prone to be somewhere linked to an armed dealer who doesn't want to be known by the formal economic system, and many, many other challenges. Yes, it is, Wall Street and others have made it fancy, and so they make it look like this borderless, non-regulatory free ways of trading between citizens across the globe and interests across the globe. But there's lots of hidden consequences. So in my field of strategy, we also talk about the iceberg, that you always need to look beneath the iceberg, because often you look at what you see on the surface a lot of things are hidden to the view below the surface. And so if you want to be a successful leader in the spirit of Vaitapele Bakamoso, as a successful person with a healthy relationship with power, as a successful global contributor, and a successful economic contributor, make sure that you guard your ethics, you guard your reputation, and therefore in total your moral authority guarded jealously. And with that, let me pause and thank everybody, especially those that saw it fit to have me as part of this milestone webinar. We look forward later when we shall be hopefully pledging. And Ceci Nkasana, I'm waiting for you to deliver my cap and my golf t-shirt to my doorstep. Thank you very much, Tobe.
Jealousy makes you nasty. Also, when you were finding me, you were actually, okay, I get it. Dr. Makwana, thank you very much. You know, you just brought back the memories of the years that were the 1980s. I know young people listening in here will not quite remember much. Most of them were not. In fact, all of them, if you had SJ van der Merwe today as a learner, you were not born in the 1980s. You didn't exist. We used to say you were an idea. Maybe your parents thought they would have you, but you didn't exist. But I just went up looking 1981, the year in which SJ van der Merwe was formed. When you talked about prison and you talked about what was happening, getting detained, you know that in this year, 1981, one of the people that were in jail or were arrested was none other than Archbishop Desmond. He was arrested in that year, I remember, and his passport confiscated. He was a man of the cloth, but he wasn't treated like one. In fact, if you just go, and my children, I'm asking you because you're on social media, just go on social media or on Wikipedia and find out what happened in South Africa in 1981. I know we think we are facing an insurrection in the country. Today, we think we are facing a lot of difficulties, but just go and find out how many bomb blasts, how many bombs were diffused, how many people were either arrested for trying to blow up this station or that station. That was insurrection. If you want to talk about insurrection, go and find out what was happening in 1981. So people like Mpoma Kwana were not getting arrested for nothing. They were getting arrested because the country was facing an onslaught. But also interesting just how many people were born in this 1981, a very exciting year. An actress called Ayanda Boroto, you know her, Kabonina Kubeka, Grant Smith, the cricketer, who was the captain. You have people like Akonan Dungani and Otto Dungani. You know, there's so many people. Bridget Masinga, Julius Malema even was born in 1981. It just tells you how revolutionary a year was. Terry Peto, Jacques Leroux, Zaid Swankwini was born in 1981, as well as people like, well, Leslie Manyatela, the late Leslie Manyatela, the great football player, and Tumi Morati, the comedian. But most of all, if we are just to remember how grim the 80s were. 1981 on 19th of November. On the 19th of November was the day on which Griffiths Mkenge was killed. Now, if you remember, Griffiths and his wife were just killed in a most brutal manner. And the 1981 was just one of the years that the apartheid regime was showing its brutality and how lethal they could go in facing down or trying to clamp down opposition. So when the governor is talking about being a leader, when he talks about this country having seen the worst or worse hostilities or adversities than what we are facing today, he knows what he's talking about because he was a young man at the time trying to just get by. And now we're going to move on to the next speaker, who's also an alumna of the school. She's going to be wrapping up the speeches, and then we will be able to go on to the panel discussion. So we are going to introduce the next speaker now. And the next speaker joined SJ van der Merwe in its 4th year of inception. She grew up in Burgersfort and she was raised by an entrepreneurial father who ran a general dealer. He was selling everything from tomatoes to paraffin to clothes. Remember, we didn't have shopping malls that we have today, so you had to really be a general dealer in the true sense of the word. It was no coincidence, therefore, that after matric, the speaker went to study economics at the universities of KwaZulu-Natal, then Wits, and including, among others, the University of London. So she has been to lots of universities. However, her love for economics is rooted at S.J. van der Merwe, and she credits this school, 40-year-old school, and the teacher, particularly Mr. Masemoa, for her love for economics. She is an executive director on the board of the African Development Bank Group. Please, if you don't know what the African Development Group does, African Development Bank Group, go and look it up. She is based in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. She's also a visiting lecturer of development finance at the Graduate School of Business at the University of Cape Town. She is also the recipient of the APSIP Most Influential Woman in the Financial Services Sector. APSIP is the Association for Black Securities and Investment Professionals. Please help me welcome our last speaker, Ms. Mahoshi Lesetja.
Thank you, Dr. Khomweswana, for the wonderful welcome. Let me try and be brief. I know we've taken much longer than we had anticipated for this segment. Before I make my remarks, I would like to acknowledge the school principal, the learners of SJ, and the surrounding schools that have been invited to participate in this webinar. Let me acknowledge the steering committee for the 40th anniversary celebrations of SJ. Let me acknowledge alumni who have joined this webinar, including friends, families. We are very grateful that you have joined us today. And this, as Victor has said, is a kickoff of celebrations that will culminate in the celebration in September. However, our mandate as the Funding and Infrastructure Committee of the Steering Committee is to focus on raising funds for the reconstruction and refurbishment of SJ. We can all agree, as Victor has said, that the school, being in its 40 years of existence, can do with some upgrading, some of which has been listed on the invite that was sent for the webinar. But more importantly, let me thank my former boss, my brother, Lesetja Kganyago, for agreeing to come and be the keynote speaker at this event. Lesetja and I come a long way, and I'm his sister. He doesn't have sisters, he only has one brother, so I'm his sister to him. And also Mpho Makwana, who is my real brother. We are related, and so it looks like we are all in a big family here today, not only as panelists, but also with the people that are tuned in here. Victor, I'm just going to focus on two areas because, as I said, we have really run out of time, and we would like to hear questions from the learners and from fellow participants. I just want to take from where the governor has ended and where Mpho came in about the impact of the crisis, particularly on the African continent, which is where I work most of my time, and which is where I am based in West Africa, and what I have seen to be the after effects of a pandemic, which for most African countries, I might say, have been through worse. You would know that West Africa was, just before COVID-19, impacted by Ebola, which caused immeasurable damage to some of these countries that are much smaller than South Africa, and really that have very few, if any, buffers to protect themselves. So in the work that I do, we focus really on the areas of policy to assess whether countries are ready to protect themselves in light of pandemics that can come in the future. And I unfortunately want to say that even with the experience that most African countries have had with pandemics of the past, COVID-19 really found us not prepared. It found us not prepared in terms of being able to do risk management, to determine or assess what level of preparedness we needed to be as countries in order to at least be able to provide our people with the support that they needed from a health perspective. It found us not prepared in terms of resources. Most African countries, even though they were growing quite successfully pre the pandemic, 10 of the most succeeding or leading economies GDP-wise were found in Africa. But it also found us not prepared in terms of the debt levels. Most of the African countries, some of which are very close to where we are in Zambia, for example, had very high levels of debt to GDP. That meant that the space, the fiscal space that these countries had to borrow money in order to support their population or to boost their health system was also impacted. And finally, it also found us less prepared in terms of as the governor said, with respect to liquidity in the economy, which affected, I must say, mostly the private sector, which is supposed to be the engine of growth in our economies. So coming from where I work on the African continent, I think the lessons that we can take from this is it is very important in leadership that you are prepared for future crises, that you crisis-proof your economies by making sure that we are growing at a pace and rate that will put us at the same level as other countries, where we will not have to struggle in terms of supporting our health systems, in terms of providing those that are without food, for example. Some of the measures, for example, that South Africa was able to provide for their people, most countries on the continent were not able to. They were not even able to provide support for the private sector. So when there's a liquidity crunch and there's no credit in the cycle, it means that then your private sector is the one that struggles. Of the segments of the economy that were most affected by the crisis, and which I believe we continue to be most affected, is with women. One of the things that unfortunately COVID-19 brought to the fore was the level of inequality that still exists between men and women. And unfortunately for our country, we are always in the news for the wrong reasons, because of the level of gender-based violence. I think this pandemic really, as others say, has brought forth another pandemic of gender-based violence to the fore. And I would like to actually say that from here, what must emerge is we must focus on gender-based empowerment, where we are raising young women that are going to be able to, as we have some of us, to be able to stand on their own, to be able to be join the economic system, and to be able to take care of themselves and their families, and also be leaders. As Victor, you have said, that most of the most successful Fortune 500 companies in the world are those that are led by women. So the importance of elevating the issues of women equality post-COVID, for me, is something that we really need to start talking about, and it's something that we need to focus on. The final point is on education. And I think really the crisis has also brought to the fore the inequalities that are in the education system. And unfortunately also brought to the fore the divide that is there between private education and public education. And for me, what is important is that really the government cannot leave education to the private sector, that it must really come in and support education to ensure that the skills that emerge post-COVID become the skills of the future, as the governor has said, and they are skills that this economy can use. We are facing a pandemic of over 50% youth unemployment. So it means that how and what we do with our education system going forward is going to be very important in helping us arrest the high unemployment that we face in South Africa, but also in ensuring that the skills that we produce are relevant for the economy of the future. And with these words, Victor, let me leave it. I think we have a lot of time that we can engage with the learners and the other participants through Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mahoshi. Very proud of your achievements always. I remember when I met you the first time, you were with the National Youth Development Agency. I can't remember what they were calling it then, but you've just been one of those young African women that I'm always associated proudly with. But just the point you're making about the gender inequality of that COVID exposed. Again, I would urge young people on this and all the people who are tuned in here to look up the studies that prove that the inequalities between men and women continue to be a problem. Women tend to earn less. Women tend to have fewer savings, although they look after more people. Women are disproportionately more in the informal economy. Women have less access to social protection. Women are likely to carry the heavier burden of unpaid care for children and domestic work, and therefore they have to drop out of the labor force. And women make up the majority of single-parent households. These are not the things I'm making up. I'm sure you know them in our society, but they are the findings of a study by the UN Women, the United Women. And just listen to what they say very quickly before I introduce the questions. Women who are poor and marginalized face even higher in the risk of COVID-19 transmission and fatalities. They face a higher risk of loss of livelihood and increased violence. Globally, listen to this number and remember it, 70% of the healthcare workers and first responders are women. 70% of the healthcare workers and first responders are women. And yet, they are not at par with their male counterparts when it comes to pay. 28% is the gap between men and women, only in the healthcare sector. Overall in the economy, the gap between men and women who are doing the same work, by the way, have the same qualification, the gap globally in the economic setup is 16%. So we need to address this. We need to address this gender equity, not look at it as something luxurious that we can just take care of at our own leisure. So I'm going to ask, unfortunately, we were going to get a performance by the choir, but because of the time, we are not going to be able to do that. I apologize, my children. I love music. I would have loved to hear you. But we are going to listen to 5 questions that I'm going to ask the governor and Mpomakwana and Mahoshi as well, to just listen to the questions and see which ones they can answer. We're going to take them in batches of 5. I think the first 5, and then we will get the panel members to choose which ones they answer to. And then we will come back and take the last batch of 5, and then we will close. Unfortunately, we won't have time to be doing a long and prolonged panel discussion because we want it to be done by 5 p.m. And we still have to listen to the vote of thanks by one of the steering committee members, Mr. Pasha Palani. So let's take the questions. Maybe we will close with the SJ van der Merwe choir. But for now, let's take the first 5 questions from the learners.
Greetings to the house at large. I'm Pastor Lesetja in grade 12. Mr. Kganyago, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed various countries for weaknesses in leadership and their ability to respond promptly. According to you, what are the lessons that we should learn in order to deal with future pandemics?
Greetings everyone. My name is Kapula Londo and I am in grade 8. How do we explain the shortage of skills in South Africa and high unemployment? So my question is, do you think funding through NSFAS will resolve this contradiction? I thank you.
Greetings and grand salutations, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tadano Pahlele, and my question is, there is an increasing trend of women in key head of state positions across the globe. Do you think South Africa is ready for such leadership? Do you think it will help change society and its treatment for women?
Greetings to you all. I'm Agnes Rogena, doing grade 12. Mr. Governor, with your experience over the years in South Africa, what have been the failure in politics and leadership? What can the people learn in electing leadership as the local elections approach? I thank you.
Greetings to you all. I am Pashile Hwediangwa, and I am in grade 12. Mr. Governor, due to high financial strains, state-owned companies like SAA, Eskom, and DINEL have relied heavily on the state for financial support. And now, Mr. Governor, my question is, do you think there have been victims of leadership or changes in operational environment? I thank you.
There you have it. I love how, always when I listen to young people, I'm moved by how brief they can be. Just listen to how loaded these questions are, but how quickly they were able to zig through. They get to the point. So I'm going to ask the governor to answer the last question, and that would be the reliance of state-owned enterprises on state support. And I think the person asking the question was asking what the real story there is, because state-owned enterprises remain a driver, a huge driver of our economy. But I'm going to ask Mpho to pick two of the following questions. One being future pandemics, how we can deal with the future pandemics, because I think both the governor, in fact, the governor, Mpho and Mahoshi, all three mentioned that this quarter is ill prepared. So maybe Mahoshi, you take how we can be prepared to deal with future pandemics, giving us the Pan-African perspective. And then you also talk about, would you like to take the question about whether SA is ready for women leadership? Or do you want me to channel it to Mpho?
Victor, Mahoshi is still a treasury official. She must answer the question about the SOCs. And Mpho is the former chair of an SOC. He must answer that question too. Me, I am just a central banker. I do not have an answer to that one. I will deal with future pandemics.
Okay, so let's reserve you for the future pandemics. This is what we call throwing people under the bus. All right, so Mpho and Mahoshi, you choose. You deal with the SOEs, one of you, and shortage of skills. Okay. And then one of you must deal with whether SA is ready for women in leadership and the failure of leadership, especially considering that local elections are approaching. And then the governor will talk about future pandemics. You see? That's what you do. When the man who signs your money shares the panel. Who's first?
I'm happy to.
Oh, you're first. Okay.
Thank you very much. Let me maybe, as instructed by my regulator, deal with the SOC matters. Indeed, I have been a chair of an SOC before, and might I add, this very important SOC, when my term ended in June 2011, to be precise, on 27 June 2011, it was 10 billion rands in the red in terms of the net profit that we declared on the occasion of handing over the annual report of that financial year to the shareholder. I continue to be involved with an SOC in Limpopo and again in the DPE in the forestry sector. SOCs are very important for our growth and development as a country. We must remember that we're in a developing state. We still are a growing democracy. And firstly, one thing that I learned a great deal from our governor when he was Director General of Treasury in 2010, around February thereabouts, we went on what the government calls a non-deal roadshow, where we met a number of funds that deal with our sovereign. And at that time, top of mind for them was around readiness of the SOC ESCOM to deal with 2010. But the key thing here is that what I learned there is that there's a lot of goodwill among sovereign fund managers towards South Africa. Yes, perhaps in recent days we've eroded our brand story, but I think there's goodwill. So because there's goodwill, our duty, firstly at an individual level, is to ensure that we make sure as to make sure that you make important choices early in life in terms of what kind of leader you wish to be tomorrow, because we're going to be looking to you who are now in high school to become leaders in 15 years' time of these SOCs. Our duty, our generation, Generation X leaders of who are in our 50s towards 60s, we have a duty to ensure that where we are entrusted with leadership, we practice moral authority, because we have to ensure that we bequeath systems that work to the next generation. And so we don't have a choice but to dig in, be part of the solution, and help find out how to make our SOCs work. In the SOC that I currently chair, we are not, it is SAFCOL, the forestry section. We are one of few SOCs that don't give a burden to the fiscus. We're able to fund and strengthen our own balance sheet. And we do have APSA, our sponsor, who addressed us earlier. I also invited him once to come and address the board of Leader in Limpopo to talk about how to partner with your bank, your commercial bank, in terms of their public sector offering. But the key thing is all current leaders of SOCs must ensure that they worry about maintaining healthy liquidity ratios on their boards as they monitor income statements, as they monitor cash flows, but most importantly, as they monitor that funds are utilized for what they are meant for. Sadly, most of the disruptions is political. And it is my hope that post the state capture process, moving forward, we will have a clear sense from our shareholder in government that you must appoint people to executive responsibility and to board responsibility in SOCs that are capable leaders. There are a lot of capable women in SOCs. I mean, one of the largest SOCs today, Transnet, is led by a protege of our governor, Portia Darby. There's lots that the governor can talk about in terms of their student years in the UK, but the most important thing is that, again, there we've got an example of a woman who's capable, who's got strong moral authority, a strong compass in terms of how to make sure that who she leads, how she leads, there's a great deal sense of right and wrong. And most importantly, as we've seen with her appointment of the executive team around her, it's capable people. Shortage of skills versus high unemployment. I think that the school system, I wouldn't rely on NSFAS, I would rely on the school system. And again, Sesinkasan, I would ask that maybe there are many ways you can do this based on what I see other schools doing. One, if you were to create early enough an alumni network where learners can know that as a learner studying economics, there's an aunt, because I'm sure she qualifies to be an aunt now by the current generation at SJ. There's an aunt called Mahoshi, she's an economist, and she's somewhere in the global economic platform. And maybe if I were able to tap into her through the alumni network, by just sending her an email twice a year, or being able to have a WhatsApp or whatever she feels comfortable with once a year. If I want to go into corporate There's an Uncle Mpo, there's an Uncle Munale, there's many others that I can tap into. Because quite frankly, if you look back to what I said about Malome Nkepile Kganyago, where he used to park his car there under the shade of the tree in front of the admin block, I used to strategically know more or less when he's going to be around because I studied his routine. And I'll just stop him as he goes to see the principal or whoever he came to see, greet, and he will say, and then I'll slip in a quick question. Malome, how do you think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And he will answer me and then say, just Liling. But my uncles in various spheres of my family took a great deal in my interest. And so as uncles from 1981, 1982, and the earlier generations of SJ, let us take keen interest in shaping, mentoring the career paths of our emerging nieces and nephews who are the current generation of SJ. So that would be my small shot in the limited time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that, because I need to take the last batch of questions. Mahoshi, we are coming to you before we ask the governor to take his easier question.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to be responding to the question of how we explain the shortage of skills in South Africa and the high unemployment rate. Look, as I said, we are facing a pandemic. Almost 50% of our young people are without jobs. And this is, for me, the foremost important thing that every policymaker in this country needs to be concerned about. And we cannot talk about unemployment without thinking about the skills that we need for this economy to thrive. And there are very critical questions to be asked about whether our educational outcomes are geared towards preparing young people for the jobs of the future. Lesetja Kganyago talks about tech, the importance of technology going forward, the importance of cryptocurrency. All of these are things that I think policymakers in the education space need to be thinking about. It cannot be that our TVET colleges and universities still produce graduates that really find themselves without jobs. So something needs to happen right there. And I think we've got historical issues. We should not shy away from that. That South Africa is still, education system is still very much racialized. Unfortunately, it is also still very much linked to the means of production of the economy of the past, not of the future. So we are emerging, or we've emerged from a predominantly mining economy in South Africa, a predominantly manufacturing economy. We have been overtaken by manufacturing by many countries, so we cannot even, we are at a stage where we really need to use technology to leapfrog if we are going to stay in the game. And also with mining. But I think we do have an advantage with being one of the leading economies with the services industry, particularly financial services. And really it's how do we, at a policy level, start to look at the areas where we can be competitive as an economy to create jobs for people. And let's not shy away from the fact that because of this, we have created a number of young people that, you know, look up, they've got wrong role models, and crime is a big factor as well. So how do we really use the education system to try and harness and bring through those children that may have learned wrong ways of doing things into the mainstream and have them lead and support the restructuring of this economy going forward post-COVID. I think for me, these are some of the issues that I think that we need to think about in order to address this unemployment question. Finally, maybe let me just talk about some of the areas that I think we have overlooked, and we shouldn't shy away from them, Victor. I mean, everybody knows South Africans. So here I'm talking about curriculum and how maybe the education system needs to really start thinking about, and schools like SJ, which have come through and produced a lot of successful people, can look at, if you are going to becoming a full service school, what is it that you need to look at? Let's not shy away from the fact that we can sing as South Africans. Let's not shy away from the fact that we are very gifted with our hands. So curricula has to really move towards those areas that we are good at, and that's arts and culture. Curricula has to move to those areas where we have indigenous knowledges to produce medicines, to produce essential oils. So agriculture becomes very important, but it's also about ensuring that agriculture we can benefit across the value chain and not only at a primary level. And these are things that I think we need to rethink and relook at in terms of improving our educational outcomes and having a curriculum that really addresses the jobs that we need if we're going to have to leapfrog out of this pandemic.
All right, I'm going to suggest something, Governor, if I may beg your indulgence. I want to take the last final question, because this question that you're going to answer might be the one we use to close this panel. Is that permissible? Okay, so let me take the last final questions, because some of them I suspect will overlap with the points, and then you will have the last word. I might throw another question in, depending on what questions come through. Let's listen to the last batch of final questions from the current learners of SJ Van der Merwe.
Greetings, Mr. Governor and the House at large. Here in front of you is Matlapu Wakang. All protocols observed. My question is, we are in the era of the fourth industrial revolution and technologies taking over the world. So where are the obvious opportunities that we as aspirant future leaders should look out for? I thank you.
Greetings, Governor. My name is Magato Matela from Musipi Secondary School in the Luwahum Second. My question to you, Governor, is, we constantly hear that poverty alleviation is high on government's agenda. In your assessment, why does it look like the government is constantly failing to resolve this issue? Thank you.
Greetings, Governor. My name is Malachi Tapelo from Musipi Secondary School in the Luwahum Second. And my question to you is, for schools that are not privileged as SJ Van der Merwe, like ours, what would be the advice from the panel in terms of focus on what the future economy will require in terms of skills? I thank you.
Greetings, Governor. My name is Lamula Muiponi from Derugova Technical High School. Gender-based violence has been rising in South Africa in recent times. As leaders in your respective organization, where do you think government is failing and where do you think society is failing? Thank you for your time.
Greetings, Governor. My name is Lokhotwani Dineo from Derugova Technical High School. One of the greatest challenges faced by leaders is that most of them have limited understanding on how to deal with a dire global crisis like COVID-19 and unemployment, and have been naturally caught unaware and unprepared. So my question is it even possible to prepare for a crisis? I thank you.
There you go. Is it impossible to prepare for a crisis? I will ask you, Governor, to lump that question with how to, Mahoshi call it, crisis-proofing ourselves for future pandemics. So that will be combined. I will not single out to the question. I'm going to ask Mpho to talk about poverty alleviation and the perception that government seems to be failing to address this. And then Governor, Mahoshi, you please talk about 4IR and where the opportunities are and future labor market dynamics, what the future market requires. So I'm going to ask Mahoshi to go first about future labor market dynamics and 4IR, where the future is headed. I know the governor referred to this when he mentioned fintech and even suggested that it could actually be tech-fin. But please address those and then address the poverty alleviation. And then, Governor, please deal with the last two questions because we really need to close this panel. So I need a discount from each one of you, time-wise. Mahoshi.
I will give you a discount, Victor, because I think I touched on these issues in the response that I just provided now about the importance of 4IR and future jobs. So I will not waste more time because I think the governor will touch on that as well. So let me leave it to him.
But now, where are the opportunities? If you think of it, just think about it. You mentioned the singing and the what are the other industry sectors, as a person who studied economics, that you would say would be ready or better positioned for this 4IR in the future labor market?
Well, I think one of the areas that, I mean, as I said, that South Africa, we are known for having a lot of natural resources. The question is, how do we use technology to leapfrog and maybe to advance from the way that we have been doing things in the past? So for me, it really applies in all sectors. And I will not want to mention any specific sector, but one area where I know that African countries are leading is on financial services. And as the governor was saying that with your cell phone, you can bank. With your cell phone, you can send money. With your cell phone, you can buy things on the internet. So areas around coding is an important one. Areas about the Internet of Things. These are opportunities where young people can, in any of the areas of technology, come in to build apps. And we've seen with Butlale, who has done a very good, come up with a very good idea around protecting, in the area of gender-based violence. The earpiece that she has created. So I can go on and on, but all I'm saying is that it's really about how we use technology to leverage the existing base of resources that as a country we have, and you can really apply it in any of the sectors that we believe are important. And for me, what is very critical and where I think the importance of education and schools is, it's about time that education responds to the needs of communities where we live. And if we think about it that way, as I said, that even for a province like Limpopo, where it is, everybody that's coming from overseas and they want to come to South Africa, they think about the Western Cape, but Limpopo has got areas of tourism that can be promoted. So how do you use technology to ensure that you attract as many tourists? And you would have you would have seen during the lockdown, in the height of the lockdown, how technology was used, for example, to have people watch and enjoy game from anywhere in the world using technology. That's a form of tourism. So these are all areas that I think when we think about jobs of the future, technology becomes a very critical part.
Yeah. Now, let's not forget that Master KG, Dr. King Onada are all Limpopo boys, and they have dominated the scene, Spotify and all the social media. They have really taken advantage of social media and ICT, or for the Industrial Revolution, to conquer the world with just simple songs. So if they can do it from the villages of Limpopo, or having originated there, who are we not to? Mpo, how would you advise the government to catch up on its backlog with regard to poverty alleviation?
I think that in the limited time I have, I'm going to limit myself to what I consider to be practical actions that young people can take and schools can take. So from a school point of view, there's a platform called Youth Cafe. Youth Cafe connects young people in South Africa, Africa, and all over the world and builds a youth-to-youth opportunity network. So I would encourage Principal Nkasana to maybe subscribe SJ to Youth Cafe so that the learners at SJ can then, whether there's a digital library or wherever they do computer things, they can tap into Youth Cafe. And then, of course, in your villages, most of us are where we are today because we were activists at school and activists at villages. So the activism of today is about exactly this. So young people in your village, go out of your way to get donations, to set small internet cafes or whatever, because not all of us have computers in our homes, and do small kiosks of this youth cafe, as an example. Secondly, in my previous life, I used to be chair of Love Life Trust. Love Life has got two very important programs that our young people can benefit from, and Love Life is present in most villages across the country. For people between ages of 12 to 17, they've got a program called the Mpinji program, which helps you as a teenager going through puberty to deal with your own noises around puberty, but prepare you for youth leadership. And then for those that are in grade 12 and going into university, they've got a thing called groundbreakers. You started when you're in grade 11, and this prepares you to be a groundbreaker, as the program suggests, leadership development, youth development, and the like. The Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, which I'm privileged to be a trustee of, also has got similar programs. So all you need to do is Google websites of Love Life, Youth Cafe, Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. You'll find activist programs that allow you, firstly, to take yourself as an individual from place A to place B, but also to help fellow youth to move forward. And then lastly, we must remember our government then started under President Ramaphosa, for those at least who have already finished school, the YES program. Unfortunately, because of COVID, it had to be slowed down. But the YES program is another way of making sure that as a young person finishing university, getting into the workplace, you get actively involved in. Whilst you're still finding your way, there's other NGOs like Harambe, which focus a lot on youth development. So just make sure, as we said earlier in our comments, be a knowledgeable citizen of the world. You know, they say where ignorance is, there's bliss. So get yourself out of that bliss and make sure you are knowledgeable. And then our teachers that are teaching life orientation, make sure you expose our young people to these 4th IR opportunities early in life. That's all I can say in this short time.
Yeah. And that goes with making sure that connectivity is faster and more affordable and data is much cheaper. Right? So thank you very much, Governor. I'm going to give you the last word. Future pandemics, future-proofing ourselves. Is it impossible to prepare for future? And that was I would call it a rhetorical question that is trying to say something. But how do we crisis-proof ourselves, to use Mafoshi's word, for future pandemics and other crises or external shocks?
I'm not sure that we can future-proof ourselves against crisis. By definition, a crisis is something you have not planned for. And what we need to be doing is what should be the state of crisis readiness that we need. So in the regulatory space, for example, we learn from every financial crisis, and then we set mechanisms in place to deal with future crises. And when we set those mechanisms in place, we don't say we are preventing a crisis. We say, should a crisis set in, what are the mechanisms that we need to be having in place in order to be able to respond to the crisis? Because if you could plan fully for a crisis, that means you know what is the crisis that is coming, and then you can prepare yourself for it. Back to the current coronavirus that we are having. The last time the world experienced something like this was 1918. It's more than 100 years. Anybody who would have done something about crisis planning then is no longer alive today. So we must learn that crisis will come, and we need to be preparing societies to be able to deal with a crisis. We cannot future-proof ourselves against a crisis. Lastly, leadership becomes very important in a crisis. And we must understand, when a crisis sets in, we are going to try new things. We're going to learn as we respond to the crisis. And we must not hesitate to state that we have made a mistake and change course because we learn as we go. What we can't do during a crisis is to try and do things that we knew failed in the past. And just because there is a crisis, we say, let us try them now. The world does not work like that. Yes, in a crisis, there is learning. We will have to try new things, but let be those new things that we are trying, like in the language of the bankers, they are done in a risk-adjusted basis. We are aware of the risks. We could quantify the risks and then say, are we prepared to live with this risk so that we would be able to respond to a crisis? That is what is important. And in this crisis that we have, we can tell is the countries that were able to respond with speed, with scale, that actually succeeded. Of course, we are South African. When there is a proposal of how we respond to something, we want to discuss it. Well, during a crisis, there isn't much time for discussion. You have got to take difficult decisions. And in taking difficult decisions, we must understand there are no easy solutions, there are no easy answers. There are only difficult trade-offs to be made, and leaders must be prepared to live with consequences of their decisions in a crisis. As long as we are able to demonstrate as leaders that we acted responsibly and that we acted and considered all the information at our disposal, whether that information is scientific or is of a policy nature and so forth. And in this crisis that we are in, scientific information became important, but also economic information became important. The false narrative that was built in South Africa was that we've got to make a decision. Are we going to save the economy or are we going to save lives? It's wrong. It's a false dichotomy. The correct question to ask was, how do we save life and at the same time preserve livelihood and the means of earning a living? And if we approach it in that manner, we will find that we are able to come out of this pandemic much better than we initially thought.
Wow, thank you very much, Governor Lesetja Kganyago, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Kwana, Non-Executive Independent Director at ArcelorMittal, among others, and Executive Director at the African Development Group, Lesetja Kganyago, both those being the alumni of SJ van der Merwe, of course, and the Governor is the alumna of PAX College. But these schools, if you know Limpopo, you will know in the 80s were the hallmark of education. But just wrapping up quickly, I'm not going to repeat what was said, but when I listened to the three panel members, I heard, let's do the basics right. The future-proofing yourself is about doing the basics and always evolving and making sure that you are ready for whatever eventuality. A crisis is going to catch you unawares, but if you are doing your basics right and you have evolved and kept pace with the developments, you will not be having, in a pandemic, having to learn how to install ICT so that people can run virtual meetings. You would have been evolving with the fourth industrial revolution trends. And then you also heard from Mahoshi here that although we are doing this and we're dealing with this as a crisis, women continue to be compromised more than men. So let's not, in the name of dealing with the crisis, overlook gender equality issues. And there's gender equality and there's gender equity here. Both must be addressed, both are urgent. Bomakwana, so many gems of pearls of wisdom that he shared, but what he started with, the paying tribute to the guardian, the role of the guardian, when he paid tribute to the body master, he was not just paying tribute to him, he was paying tribute to the importance of the guardian, that no young person can raise themselves. The young person needs guidance, young person needs somebody watching over them, and he emphasized that you can be anything you want to be, and you are not a man or a woman by virtue of your gender, but you are a man or woman by virtue of how you contribute to society, how you shape society. Read a lot outside of your area of specialization, some of the germs that came up. Work hard to build a critical mass of achievers around yourself so that you are not that only black at the dinner party. In the words of Eric Bien, he wrote a book called Omandingo, the only black at the dinner party. Don't be the only black at the dinner party. Moral authority emphasized that. But for young people listening here, I think if you take nothing else from Pomakwana's contribution, take away that social media skills can and must be learned. Be an active player there. He mentioned Youth Cafe, among other things. He mentioned LinkedIn, but he said, don't go there just to make a fool of yourself or try to be funny. Because some of the things you post in the name of being funny will come back and bite you. The governor started with a note of the economic collapse that we had to deal with, the role of central banks in times of crisis, the response measures, including the zero interest rate to shore up the economy, including sometimes unconventional methods that were used. But the broad-based response to shore up this economy suffered from its own, and he's mentioned our economy was already suffering from its own comorbidities. It was a slow-growing economy as it is. It was suffering from a lot of perception crises that people were looking at. So when we had to deal with the liquidity requirement by going to the bond market, we were not just dealing with whether there was liquidity, but we were dealing with whether people were willing to buy our bonds. Because when people buy your bonds, they are saying, we trust your government to run the country in such a way that whatever money we lend to it will be paid in whatever number of years when the bonds reach the end of their tenure. He emphasized technology, fintech, and techfin. He's just showing that is not one or the other, one coming before the other. It's the convergence of technology and finance that come together. And you heard him give a warning as cryptocurrency and other cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin and all that. He emphasized the basics, and often the basics are important. He said, remember, when somebody comes to you and says you can store value in this, you can invest in this and make money, ask them a question. Is your currency a unit of account? Is it recognized as a medium of exchange? And does it store value over time? You can put 10 rand note in your mattress, and after 5 years, it will still be a 10 rand note. Inflation might have eroded its value, but at least when you show somebody the 10 rand note, they will know what you're showing them. So make hay while the sun shines was the issue. And let's also thank Stephen Siaka for emphasizing that there's a private sector out there that's willing to match what is being raised here today. So if you are watching, it's very cold where I am, people. I had to wear a short-sleeved shirt for a long time because I was trying to model this. SJ van der Merwe, we need to buy these outfits. Pomakwana, I'm not getting fined by anybody. I have already been fined. This cold weather has got me going. So let's make sure we contribute, folks, that we're not playing here. We're not playing. We're raising funds for a school that has given us some of the best South Africans. Some of them on this panel, some of them we listened to them, some of them we saw as we ran through the list of alumni. So we're not playing. We are serious about raising money. The school hall I drive past when I go to see my mother, I want to see it much better. The dining hall that needs to be upgraded. I want to see a much better hall because the school is along my road. Stephen Siaka, thank you very much. Tate Monalera Tsuma, thank you very much for the work you're doing here. And I'm going to call, before we get to the school choir to close for us, I'm going to call a member of the alumni, the leader here, who's going to do the vote of thanks. But before I do that, let me just read something from Marianne Williamson very quickly. I like quotations because I like to use the word of ours. Our deepest fears, my children, is not that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant? Who am I to be gorgeous, talented, or fabulous? Actually, the question is, who are you not to be fabulous, talented, and gorgeous? You are the child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure when they're around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us. It is in all of us. It is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Thank you very much, everyone. This is the last you're hearing from me. After that, and you are going to be here in the school choir of SJ van der Merwe. We hope to see you at the future events of this brilliant school. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. Let's listen to Tate Pate Palani, who is Vice President at Unilever Southern Africa, in charge of supply chain, among other things. Tate Palani, we are in your hands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khomeswana. On behalf of the alumni of SJ van der Merwe Technical High School, I would like to thank Governor Lesetja Kganyago, my fellow alumni, Mr. Mpomakwana and Ms. Makhoshi Lesetja, for such an engaging and very diverse lessons on leadership and economy as we pivot the many challenges that we have, with the COVID-19 pandemic being one of them, and the many socio-economic challenges that have been pre-existing in our country. You have given us food for thought. I would also like to thank our main sponsors, Absa Bank. Without your support, putting this together would have been a mountain to climb. Our events coordinator, Peladi Mpahlele, who's also an alumni of SJ van der Merwe, the Red Cherry team, Francois from the production team of Absa Equinox. Your builds and your coordination in this event has been very valuable. To all the people that attended this webinar, your presence is highly appreciated. To those that have already made some contribution, your contribution is going to go a long way towards us building an all-inclusive and comprehensive technical high school where we build future leaders of our country and live the motto of our school that says, Baetapele Bakamuso. So far in this pledging, we have now raised about 430,000, and this is a combination of the alumni and corporates. We say thank you for this pledge. Our fundraising doesn't end today, so we call upon all alumni, individuals, organizations, and companies to continue the pledging and our fundraising so that we build this all-inclusive school for all. I say thank you. Please stay safe. Use all the measures for COVID-19 prevention. Goodbye.
Signore, you.